And we are live. So hello, welcome to Raw Sports 2020-21 Premier League preview show. We're starting a bit late, but it's all right. We've got time to go through the fortunes and predictions of the 20 teams competing in this year's Premier League season. A few quick plugs. So if you missed it last week, we did a NFL fantasy draft show that's still there with some of the Warwick Wolves, so you can check that out still. And in the video description, you can still join the Raw Sport Ball Fantasy Premier League. Link's still there for that. And also joining the Raw Sport group ahead of the upcoming year. So if you want to take part in these shows, join the group, and all kind of guest requests will be there. So a few plugs there, but without further, so with that done, I should also say I am your head of sport, Josh Sim. Not sure if I mentioned that just then, but with me today, I've got two panelists at the moment. We have our deputy, although deputy for how long, I don't know, honorary deputy, I guess, Joe Spagnoli is with me. Joe, how have you been?
I mean, living week by week here, Josh. I'm on about 3 hours sleep, so I'm going to be in an even shorter mood than usual this afternoon. But looking forward to savaging about half the upcoming Premier League table.
Yep, I would say. I mean, you've come fully prepared. You've got all your ammunition ready, and I can't wait to see you take apart each team and doing that with you, or maybe acting as the counterbalance. We've got Cam Hall, who hosts the alternate view,
Alternative, yeah.
alternative view. I knew I had it. I was just, there was a moment of panic. I went, is it
Yeah.
alternative?
Don't worry, early on, I was early on in the run. Enoch, our head of news, kept promoting the show with a different name every week. And the amount of passive aggressive DMs we got, so perfectly fine.
Yeah, but you hosted that term 3. I can assume that you'll be coming back for term 1.
I will be back. Yes, I will.
Yes. All right, there we go. I will just put that up. So before we talk about this coming season, there were obviously a few kind of awards for last season. Briefly, so Player of the Year, no surprise, Joe. Kevin De Bruyne, probably the best player playing in England at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think Luke Edwards and I described it as a one-horse race for Player of the Year on the awards stream that we did a few months ago. Very unsurprising. One of the easiest Player of the Year awards in recent years to award. Since Eden Hazard left Chelsea, unquestionably the best player on paper in the Premier League. He's just had, after such a long-term injury, I mean, to come off with a season like that, absolutely incredible. And if he's firing again this year, we can assume that there may well be an actual title race in the Premier League this year as well.
Yeah, and he will be key for Man City, which we'll talk about for the upcoming season. Young player of the year went to Trent Alexander-Arnold. Again, another crowded field. Cam, I mean, it's fair to say Trent Alexander-Arnold is one of England's brightest and best young prospects at the moment. And so would you say he's a deserved winner from last season?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing with Trent Alexander-Arnold is he's very much that sort of complete player that Jurgen Klopp has kind of been looking to develop and looking to get. Not only is he a good defender, and that's something that he's really worked on and really started to show last season. That defence at Liverpool was tight, but as a fullback as well, what he provides up front is just something that's really unparalleled. What him and Andy Robertson do is just unparalleled compared to, I think, anyone else in the Premier League. And in terms of sort of that England team, you know, I was reading something saying England have the strongest right backs in the world at this moment in time. And the fact that he can, you know, go ahead of like Trippier, Walker, he's an exciting young talent. And I think given I think he's only still 21, I think he's really showed that potential last season. I think well deserved, and there's so much more definitely to come from him this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was also nominated for the Player of the Year award outright as well, which he obviously lost to De Bruyne. On the women's side, Beth England won Women's Player of the Year, and Lauren Hemp won Young Player of the Year. Both very exciting female players, fully deserved again. And then for the Team of the Year, PFA Team of the Year, I've got that down here. So we had Nick Pope in goal. Joe, beforehand, we were discussing this team. There were a few choices made that you wouldn't have agreed with. Do you want to explain further?
Well, I was immediately surprised by Nick Pope in goal when we consider that when we did the award stream a few months ago, the debate was between Dean Henderson and Alison Ramses-Becker of Liverpool. If they're going to put Pope in there, I can kind of understand, especially in post-lockdown form. The overwhelming surprise here, and you were saying this to me earlier, comes from David Silva being selected in midfield over Mateo Kovacic, over Jorginho, over all of Wolves' midfielders. For me, that seems more like a legacy award than anything else. I'm not saying he had a bad season last year. There were certainly a lot of Manchester City players who did. But no, I would not have him anywhere near this team. For me, Jorginho absolutely deserves that position. Apart from that, though, the midfield is exactly the same as the one we picked.
Yeah. Cam, any thoughts on this? I know this might be, I don't know if you saw this team beforehand or not, but anything spring to mind?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really interests me is the Nick Pope one, because obviously there is the big debate at the moment over who England are going to take to Euros next year as our number one. And obviously you've got Pickford, you've got Pope, you've got Dean Henderson as well. And I think really that sort of recognition is the sort of thing that will go a long way for Nick Pope, who has many times got those points for Burnley. And I think it's a recognition of just those efforts that he's put in. I think, again, throughout the team, Mane, Vardy, Aubameyang last season pretty much, especially Vardy and Aubameyang, carried their teams last season. I think in many ways this is a reflection of not necessarily the team, because I think obviously Liverpool won last season because they were the best team, but they didn't necessarily have the best individual performances. But I think this really reflects just how much individuals carried their teams last season. So De Bruyne, Vardy, Aubameyang. And I think on that front, yeah, I'd say on the most part, I agree with David Silva. I think it is very much a legacy award. He wasn't at his strongest last season. But I think apart from that, they have got the team pretty much accurate.
Yeah. Well, you hear stories about how seriously players, opportunities are voted by the players. So there's obviously club bias might come into it, loyalties to players, etc. So yeah, I mean, you take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but I think for the most part, like you guys said, I think I agree with you guys in terms of question marks over some of the positions that you talked about, but I would, for the most part, agree. So with that season kind of bookended, obviously this season it's already started. We've got some live updates. Fulham Arsenal kicked off a short time ago. Lacazette has put Arsenal in front. And then, as you can tell, it's a staggered schedule, and it seems to be a staggered schedule for the rest of the month. So it's an interesting one, especially, and we will at Raw Sport, the team, will keep you up to date on what our Saturday broadcast looks like, because obviously Super Saturday looks slightly off if we have games on every 2 hours. It's a bit of a predicament to manage. So we'll keep you up to date on what we decide to do with a Saturday broadcast. Probably something like this, a football talk show, rather than having people commentate, because it's all scattered. So we will keep you up to date on anything that happens at Craven Cottage. So with that, I guess we will run through each of the 20 teams before asking everyone for their predictions. We will run through from the last year's standings and then the 3 promoted teams. So we will hence start with Liverpool and the champions. I have got a list of signings. So before I ask kind of everyone what they think, I will just run through their major additions and subtractions. So at Liverpool, the only signing they've made of note is Kostas Smikas. I think I've hopefully pronounced it correctly. About 11.75 million, close to 12 million from Olympiacos, Greek left back. And then obviously we've been heavily linked with Thiago. That hasn't happened yet. As far as I know, Bayern and Liverpool, there's a price difference of 5 million euros that Liverpool are unwilling to pay. Bayern want them to pay. So we wait to see on that. Going out, Dejan Lovren has moved to Zenit St. Petersburg for 11 million, much to some Liverpool fans' relief, I imagine. And Adam Lallana has gone to Brighton for free. Adam Lallana we will talk about later when we talk about Brighton. So with that, Joe Spanioli, very quiet window for Liverpool. Would this be a worry for you that they haven't really strengthened and are pretty much rolling out the same team as last year?
I dare say it's a characteristically quiet window for Liverpool Football Club, looking at their business over the last couple of years. First of all, incredibly good work to get £11 million for Dejan Lovren, who had maybe his worst season at Liverpool last year. Lovren was always considered part of that core centre-back core depth chart at Liverpool. Last year, absolutely not. There was a clear starting 11 there, and Lovren was absolutely nowhere near it. Losing him's not going to be much of an issue, and although I love the guy, losing Adam Lallana as well, not a massive problem. Get some wages off their books, although Liverpool's wages are mostly performance-based bonuses, so that's okay. I honestly don't think it's much of a problem in the context of the Premier League. Liverpool were superlative last year. They didn't have many defensive issues. Their midfield looked fantastic. It's more a case of keeping players at the same level as they were last year. I didn't see any immediate massive signings they needed to make. This has, to be honest, for me, more of an issue on the European stage. But again, this is a Premier League prediction show. I think Liverpool come into this season in a very good position to retain their title if they perform anywhere near as well as they did last year. Man City may well run them close, but honestly, I wouldn't be worried. Liverpool have been quiet the last two transfer windows, and we all know how well they turned out last year.
Yeah, I'll just add, we will preview the Champions League probably closer to that first match day. So, and obviously it'll give us a few weeks at least to see how teams settle. Obviously, the transfer window is still open till October, which is kind of its clubs are in a weird position right now where they can still add and subtract even as the season starts. Cam Hall, what are your thoughts on Liverpool? Should they be the favourites heading into this upcoming season?
Well, I think there's no doubt Liverpool have the strongest 11 in the Premier League. I think the team that they put out, not necessarily the individual quality of the players, because the quality is there, but the way that 11 sort of plays to Klopp's style of football. Klopp has really used the market over the last years to get those sorts of players in, to really play the style of football what he wants, and just something that really blends well as a team. But I think Joe is right. The biggest issue that Liverpool have got is their depth. And I think, I know you said maybe it's not an issue in the Premier League, but I think it could be, because there's no real replacement, I'd say, to Mane, Salah or Firmino. If any one of them gets injured, Minamino isn't the person you necessarily want to step in. He's not going to have that sort of same connection. I think Thiago is a player they need to try and get in the midfield if they can. He just add that squad depth. I'm not sure he'd necessarily be a starting 11 player, because the 11 that they have, particularly in that midfield, is very strong. I mean, I can't see who you would take out. Henderson, Fabinho, Wijnaldum, Naby Keita's on good form as well at the moment. So it's hard to see how they can take anyone out of that 11, but they need more depth. And I think especially with this season, it's going to be so condensed because we've lost that first month to coronavirus. The fixture list is going to be tough. And so I think that if Liverpool can't get that squad depth, but also I think worryingly for them as well, after lockdown, the way they after they won the league, the way their form topped off a bit. Now, we saw the Community Shield final, Liverpool weren't back to their best that game. And so if they're not at that level and they've not got that squad depth, I don't think Liverpool are favourites to retain their title this year. I think City are going to run them a lot closer. I think will usurp them, and I think it is just a result of that squad depth. But Liverpool will certainly be at that same level. But injuries and I think just general fatigue could come in and start knocking them back.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about they were obviously eyeing Timo Werner for a very long time to add to their front line. It didn't happen. Obviously, Thiago, as we mentioned, there's a lot of rumor that Wijnaldum might be headed out to Barcelona. Thiago might then come in, but of course, Liverpool, if you look at the words of Jurgen Klopp and their way that their club operate, they clearly feel they need to sell first before they buy. I think Jurgen Klopp this week made a dig at Chelsea and Man City, saying we're not a team owned by an oligarch or a country. So yeah, it's it's a very interesting quandary. I mean, I guess the other side to it is that they all know their roles pretty well and they all know their system pretty well. And unlike Chelsea, where there's wholesale change, you know what to expect from this team, and you can expect them, I guess, to hit their peak performance a lot quicker. But yeah, I mean, Joe, are you also of the same opinion that Liverpool will be run a lot closer? And if so, is there anything they can do? I mean, what is it that they need to address, if there is anything they need to address between now and October?
Well, to be honest, I hadn't actually considered the fixture and congestion throughout the season, so that might well be what undoes Liverpool at the end. My prediction of them holding on to their league title is based on them landing Thiago. I do agree with Cam. They need additions across across their team. It doesn't necessarily need to be starting quality players, but if you add Thiago Alcantara to that midfield, all of a sudden you've got what may well be the best midfield in club football these days, which sounds incredible, but I really do believe that. In terms of what they can do to combat especially the fixture congestion, it sounds very anti-Liverpool, but lowering the intensity of how they play, becoming like less stamina dependent in their central game style, might be necessary for them to combat this fixture list. However, that is what defines Liverpool Football Club, their athleticism, their gegenpressing. So I don't know if that's something that they can feasibly do and play at the same level as they were last year. In terms of what they can do, look, we know FSG have the money. They can definitely bring in players at lower contracts than, say, Man United or Chelsea could. If they sign a couple of bench players, players like Tsimikas and Minamino, that kind of profile, Liverpool can quite happily fill in their squad with Premier League quality players and hold on to this title. The main question for Liverpool until the end of the transfer window is holding on to players like Wijnaldum, who personally I don't think is going anywhere near the mess of a club that is Barcelona. After that, they've still got, as Cam says, probably the strongest starting 11 in terms of quality and cohesion in the Premier League. I'm not worried about them, especially considering, final point, their injury retention rate is fantastic as well. Players can go out at Liverpool with long-term injuries and come back playing fantastically. And they also don't get many injuries that much anyway. Their medical staff's on it. I'm still optimistic about Liverpool. I'm not too worried about the issues going into this season.
Yeah, and again, as Jurgen Klopp he spoke about a lot of things, and again, he also spoke about player welfare and why he was very much in favour of keeping the 5 substitutes rule as opposed to the three-man rule, which maybe it's a sign that obviously he's looking for player welfare. Maybe it's an acknowledgement that maybe his team will be coming off a lot of fatigue from having just finished their season a few months earlier. So we wait to see on that. We'll flip the coin and move on to Man City. I guess their biggest challengers for the title. They've brought in 2 signings so far. Nathan Ake for £41 million. That's quite the fee. We've talked about this previously on a previous show. Carl had a lot of words to say on that one. And then they've also brought in, again, Ferran Torres, 21 million. By the way, all these fees I've got, they come from the transfer market website, so fairly accurate. 21 million from Valencia, heavily linked with Kalidou Koulibaly from Napoli. It remains to be seen if that gets done. And then heading out, Leroy Sané is the big departure to Bayern Munich for about £55 million. Then they also have lost David Silva to Real Sociedad. Claudio Bravo, Angelino has gone out on loan as well. So all in all, Cam, not huge changes made to Man City's team, but they have strengthened their depth at least. How optimistic are you that they can run Liverpool a lot closer than I believe it was 18-point gap to Liverpool last season or something along those lines? What do you make of their chances of running them a lot closer?
Well, the wheels came off, it's fair to say, for Guardiola last season. The team, they've been 100-point, 98-point the previous 2 seasons. It just kind of tailed off. And I think for many ways that was just a blip. I think they can definitely run Liverpool a lot closer. I think they're going to win it this year. It's interesting. Perhaps the one most important thing from all the transfers you mentioned was the one that hasn't been done yet, which is for Kalidou Koulibaly. And that really is the one thing that Man City need right now. They need to get that centre-back to just really stabilise that defence. We saw that Aymeric Laporte's a fantastic centre-back, arguably one of the best in the Premier League, perhaps maybe only behind Virgil van Dijk. But I think just to have that stable partnership at Man City, because obviously we've had Otamendi, we've had John Stones, we have Fernandinho. Just to have a proper established centre-back will just cure those frailties last season and really give City that momentum that they need to go over the top. But I think even if they don't get someone of Koulibaly level, I think there's a real hunger in the Guardiola team. He really wants to get that title back. His players want to get that title back. And in terms of the players that have come in, that Nathan Ake will shore up that defence for a bit. He's a good signing. Ferran Torres is extremely exciting, a very hotshot young prospect, but also one man I think is going to be key to them really gaining that momentum back, Phil Foden. And I think with David Silva gone, I think there's a real momentum now for Phil Foden to get time in that starting 11. And we saw after lockdown, which was arguably, I would say, some of the best football that we'd seen in the Guardiola era at City, that Phil Foden was just one of those players that really starting to make things tick, really come into his role. And I think the collection of the likes of him and De Bruyne, I think, and move Fernandinho back into the midfield where he's more comfortable, really play that holding midfielder role well if they can get that centre back in. And then, you can't argue with Aguero, Raheem Sterling, Bernardo Silva. There's just so much quality in that team. And yes, a couple of reinforcements I think will be key to just give City that extra edge. But I think there's that real hunger and depth in that team now that means I think this season it will be close. City and Liverpool will be back, I think, to where we were 2018-19, like 1 point between them. But I think City are just going to edge it this year.
There we go. Joe, I mean, listening to Cam has them as his Premier League favourites and obviously Premier League winners. We'll talk about predictions when we get to do closer to the end part of the show. Clearly City have taken action. They've not sat on their laurels. They clearly identified areas that they need to strengthen, and they have. The question I put to you, I guess, is that enough, or is it, as Cam says, are we waiting on that Koulibaly signing to push them over the top, and make them, de facto, maybe favourites or first challenger or whatever? Are we waiting on that Koulibaly signing to fully strengthen our confidence in this team?
Well, before I go into that, I'd just like to state my annoyance at Cam for saying everything I wanted to say about Phil Foden, someone who I've been screaming for Pep Guardiola to start for God knows how many years now, and he absolutely proved why he is, for me, the most exciting young English midfielder by an absolute country mile. Fantastic player post-lockdown, and I think he should be a part of that Manchester City starting 11 this year. Absolutely deserves his place. In terms of the Koulibaly signing, I'm actually not so dependent on it. Firstly, I won't go into it. Napoli are in a bit of a mess with their president, Aurelio De Laurentiis, at the moment. So there's a good chance that Koulibaly wouldn't be able to leave anyway. Although, as far as I understand, Gattuso can do without him. Amazing, crazy though that sounds. So if he's going to move to a club in England, it will be Man City. I mean, I've questioned Manchester City's defence for several years, and I honestly do believe that if Koulibaly came in, he'd be a worse player within 6 months. They've got Eric Garcia coming through. Now, I know Guardiola's been talking about Eric Garcia in similar ways to how he describes Phil Foden in midfield for several years. Garcia at the moment doesn't want to re-sign a contract. He wants to go to Barcelona. Why you'd want to go to Barcelona at the moment, I've got no idea. But if he can come in, they've already got Nathan Ake, who I think is a bit of a rotation option anyway. The additions they've made in defence, I don't think they especially need Koulibaly in quotation marks. Manchester City have made enough big money centre-back signings, and they usually go completely down the toilet within 12 months. So I think they could do better than spending a massive fee on Kalidou Koulibaly. Trust in their youth, which with Foden and Garcia so far has been a massive success. And as for in terms of strengthening their depth, look, I don't think anyone's going to argue Ferran Torres is a better player than Leroy Sané, but Sané was going to be out of the question no matter what. And considering he's been injured for so long, Ferran Torres can only be regarded as a net positive for Manchester City. They have improved their team this summer. It's that wonderful combination of enough change for them to be different and difficult to play against, but enough continuity to be, as Cam says, back at the level they were a couple of years ago. I mean, I've got Liverpool winning the league, but I can't emphasise enough. It is going to be close, within 5 points. I do believe that. This is a better Man City team than we saw last year. And in terms of will they be better than last year? Yeah, absolutely. Because relative to the quality of their players, they couldn't get much worse at times last year.
Oh, hello.
You're working, Josh. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right, are we back? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I cut you off there. I mean, I assume you were making
didn't
your
cut me
final
off,
point
it's
about
fine.
City.
Yeah, you didn't cut me off. It's fine. It's just your Swiss internet again.
Yeah. Well, I'll be in a student house before long, so yeah, so there'll be change there. But yeah, I think with Manchester City, look, I mean, I don't, obviously we're not talking about the Champions League, but obviously, Pep has been known to tinker. It goes sometimes well, sometimes not well. And so it'll be interesting to see if he changes anything of their approach. If he changes any of their their approach heading into this season. As you guys said, Fernandinho pushing up into midfield, maybe that does something, maybe it doesn't. But yeah, it should be again, it should be an interesting one, and they should definitely push Liverpool all the way. I guess from moving on there, would we say those two are the two teams you have having a chance of winning the title? Is there a third team that could do it, or are those two your de facto favorites? I'll start with Joe. You're nodding. You're nodding there.
Yeah, I haven't seen enough of Chelsea and Manchester United to trust
Okay.
that they'll be close enough. The gap for me is just too great. If Man City get better and Liverpool don't fall off the cliff, I think it's going to be between them two. Chelsea and United not too far behind, but it's between these two.
Okay, Cam.
Yeah, I think Joe's hit it on the head. I think Chelsea and United will definitely develop this season, and I think obviously the signings at Chelsea is something that's really exciting to see how that gels, but that will need time to gel. United is still developing, so a couple of seasons they'll be there, but I think it is again between Liverpool and City this season, but definitely a lot closer between the top two.
Okay. Yeah. That kind of prefaces the next teams we kind of look at, the next grouping, if you like. Manchester United finished third, so I guess last season. So we start with them, and they've made one signing, like Liverpool, Donny van de Beek, £36 million from Ajax. Obviously, have been chasing and are still chasing Jadon Sancho, as they have been throughout the whole summer. In terms of departures, Alexis Sanchez has gone to Inter on a free deal, obviously after his loan spell, and then I guess other than that, we Joe, you'll know more about this. Chris Smalling to Roma looks like more of a possibility.
The door has been closing supposedly on that deal for about 3 months at this point. There must be at some point there's a difference of a couple of million. Whether or not he ends up making the move to the capital, I don't think Smalling's really part of Solskjaer's plans either way. Even if he is on paper one of the best centre backs United have, Solskjaer, there's a reason that he sent him out on loan anyway, and there's a reason that Smalling wanted to leave. But the word I'm getting is from Smalling, who I think is still in Italy, and his new Italian agent, is that he does want out of this football club. It's going to happen, but transfer business is a little bit unusual this summer, so we'll wait and see on that.
Yeah. Okay. So Sanchez has gone. Smalling's gone from United, and then a few. Youngsters. Angel Gomez has gone to Lille on a free deal. Taif Chong's gone to Werder Bremen on a loan deal. So not many major departures. Obviously, Van de Beek is a big name signing. We wait to see what United do in terms of their wing position. But Joe, I haven't asked you this yet. Do you have United as your best of the third best team in the league at the moment? Where do you have them?
No, I don't have them at third, although I do have them in fourth place and definitely challenging for that top four. So again, continuity from last year. I like the fact that for the first time in a long time, it seems like we've got a stable centre-back partnership at Manchester United of Harry Maguire and Victor Nilsson-Lindelöf. I like their defence. Wan-Bissaka at right-back. Cam was talking about England's right-back depth before. Wan-Bissaka from a defensive standpoint is absolutely exceptional. I really like their midfield pivot. I wasn't expecting the Van de Beek signing, but there's no question that he improves that midfield. Whether or not they get Jadon Sancho, I think this team has improved. My question mark versus Frank Lampard's Chelsea is, are we going to see another massive Solskjaer slump, which would be the fourth that he's had since coming into that Manchester United job? I again think there's a limit to how far this Man United team can go this year. Yes, they're going to be in the top four, but I don't think they're going to make enormous progress up the table. Fourth place.
Okay, yeah, I think that's well, I would say that's, I guess, consensus wise, I would think many people have them around that spot. And I'm before I ask Cam where roughly he has Man United, it seems, Cam, that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, ever since he became permanent manager, has always been under the spotlight. I guess every time he goes on a bad run of results, he seems like he's close to being sacked, and then somehow pulls out a few results here or there, and it kind of keeps him in the job. With given that they've now got an improved team, surely do you think that the pressure on Solskjaer is now is as high or as much as it has ever been since he's joined United?
Well, to be honest, I think when Solskjaer first got the job, I don't think the impetus was as much on results, but more the style of play at United, going off the back of Van Gaal and Mourinho, who pretty much bored United fans to death and didn't bring the results with it. But yeah, I think the thing is that I think Joe really hit the head on one of the most important things with Solskjaer, which is that he is extremely inconsistent. He went on this run in 2020. United have been brilliant, but you don't know how they're going to come out this season. And so I think just because of the nature of the job, I think now we've started to get the style of play coming through. I think United need results now. And I think almost getting Champions League last season has almost really enforced the need that United need to have results this season. That's where the pressure is going to be on Solskjaer now. I think one of the interesting things, though, about the team, the Van de Beek signing is a very interesting one for me, because obviously we really started to see that really strong pivot in the midfield last season, with obviously Pogba and Fernandes working well with each other. That was bringing results and really lifted that team. But I think Van de Beek, Pogba, and Fernandes in midfield, I feel it's just going to be too unbalanced. I feel if Solskjaer needs to really start getting that team right, and he needs to get the balance right there, and I think he would be wrong to play all three, and I think that would reduce the team. So it's going to be interesting to see how he plays them. I think you need to have a Matic, McTominay kind of holding midfielder with then two of Pogba, Fernandes, and Van de Beek there. But I think that's really the main thing for him. I think certainly, as Joe was saying, the defence is looking strong. I think Solskjaer's kind of come across that centre-back partnership. Obviously, it was extremely inconsistent at first under Mourinho, but I think Maguire, him coming in, has really provided leadership. Jadon Sancho, again, would obviously improve that front three. I mean, I think credit to Solskjaer, I think, in finding that style, that's trying to bring that typical United style back. He's got Rashford, Martial, Mason Greenwood's come through, and they're a really good attacking trio up front who really play that exciting attacking football. But I think at the same time, obviously, Jadon Sancho would definitely improve that. It would be first name on the team sheet. And it would really, with players like Greenwood, with that midfield, really adds some depth that's going to get United those results. So Solskjaer needs to now start getting results. Now he's getting that style of play through. And I think the big worry, as kind of Joe said, is, are we going to go to the fourth slump in Solskjaer? And that inconsistency, that's what's going to harm him ultimately, if he can't keep that. But I would say fourth for this season, definitely.
Yeah, and we're also joined by Carl Henningway, as viewers may notice. Carl, we're just talking about Man United. Do you have them round about third, fourth, fifth in that kind of tier? What do you make of them ahead of the season?
Yeah, I think I sort of put them to the lower end of that, maybe fourth or fifth, because given the shout that I think Chelsea might have this season, and given at the moment Arsenal are playing right now, and I've been watching some of it, they're looking pretty strong. I mean, I know it's against Fulham, but they are playing pretty well, and they're looking well drilled as opposed to normal. So I think Arsenal are going to look pretty strong this season. So I'm thinking Chelsea, Arsenal, and United are going to really struggle for those three places.
Yeah, and actually, there's been a goal at Craven Cottage. I'm just frantically trying to update the goal ticker, but Gabriel has scored on his debut for Arsenal, doubling their lead at Craven Cottage. So Arsenal 2-0
as well, 3-0.
Aubameyang.
That was a 3-0 as well. There we go. Wow. So the goals are flying for Arsenal, and we'll get to Arsenal. It's just the problem is they finished 8th last season, so they're fairly down the table from last season. So I mean, you guys mentioned the Blues there, so we'll touch upon Chelsea next. They had quite the summer. They've signed Hakim Ziyech from Ajax for 36 million pounds, Timo Werner from Leipzig for 48 million pounds, Ben Chilwell for 46 million pounds from Leicester, Malang Sarr a free deal from Nice, Thiago Silva a free deal from PSG, and Kai Havertz 73 million pounds from Bayer Leverkusen. Edouard Mendy, we believe, is close to signing for them as well from Rennes, and upgraded the goalkeeping position. In terms of outgoings, the Morata deal became permanent this summer, 51 million pounds. For those who remember Alvaro Morata, Joe, yep, that's my reaction too. Mario
51 million.
Pasilic, yep, he went for 51 million. Mario Pasalic went to Atalanta for 13.5 million. Again, a permanent deal from a loan. And then obviously Willian and Pedro have left respectively for Arsenal and Roma, and Michy Batshuayi Palace on loan. We'll talk about Palace in a bit. So, wow, there's a lot that Chelsea have done. Cam, I mean, if you were putting yourself in the shoes of a Chelsea fan, you'd be incredibly excited about this season.
Absolutely. I mean, the transfer business is incredible. And obviously, I think if you're an FFP lawyer right now, maybe you'd be having a small heart attack at Chelsea's transfer business. But the signings have really complemented what Chelsea needed. I think in Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, Hakim Ziyech, you've got just some really exciting players. And Kai Havertz especially, he's going to grow into that role at Chelsea. And that's something that I just can't wait to see, especially when you've already got a midfield with the likes of N'Golo Kante, Mateo Kovacic, Mason Mount. That Chelsea team is going to be exciting. I think the only thing I would say to Chelsea, and this is why I don't think they can challenge, at least this season, why it's going to be long term, is we saw it when obviously Tottenham sold Gareth Bale and they brought in loads of players, Ericsson, Lamela, Zakirakesh, all these players have pretty much now come and gone. We've seen it with United as well. When United splashed the cash under Van Gaal and Mourinho, teams take time to gel. And I think Lampard as well I'm not entirely sure what his philosophy is at Chelsea, what sort of style of football he wants to be playing. And so I think Chelsea are going to take time. I don't think you can expect immediate results and an immediate push for the title just because you have these players. It'll come, I think, in 2 or 3 years. But I think this season is very much getting that team together and getting that style of play that Frank Lampard wants. Obviously, Abramovich, we're hoping, he seems with the Lampard project, seems to be in it for the long term. Obviously, any sort of sacking Abramovich going back to the ways he's been of late, that could change it. But you've got to hope. I think it's going to be a long-term project, but Chelsea will be there, but not this season.
Yeah, and Joe, to me, it seems like Chelsea are kind of the story of the summer, if you like. And I guess now, what do you think about, as Cam says, that they've obviously had an amazing season last year and kind of cultivated a lot of youth talent that previously hadn't been given many opportunities, and now they've added to that batch with a lot of quality. Where do you see Lampard going with this? Do you feel that some of that young talent may find themselves on the periphery this season, or do you think he'll find a way to kind of marry the two together and produce kind of a very exciting team for the future?
I mean, oddly, I think Chelsea are going to be one of the teams hit by the limit of 3 substitutes versus 5, because there's a hell of a lot of rotation, especially within that midfield area. Players like Mason Mount, who had pretty good seasons last year, not amazing by any means, quite inconsistent, especially in the middle part of the season, but definitely an improvement nonetheless. Like Ruben Loftus-Cheek, when he comes back as well, he's going to be a part of that picture. So Chelsea, I think rotating the amount of players they have is going to be difficult. However, ultimately having too many players is a problem that a lot of football clubs, quite frankly, dream of. In terms of going up the table, I echo Cam's sentiment. I really do not rate Frank Lampard as a top-class manager. When I think about Chelsea last year, I actually think about an awful lot of the red flags they had. Inconsistencies in attack, dreadful goalkeeping regression with Kepa Arrizabalaga, and a defence that was, for me, probably the worst Chelsea defence we've seen for some time, and considerably worse than it was under Maurizio Sarri. But I say that, and they've answered pretty much every single one of those. There's there's been a gradual transition of attackers, which is what I really like. So Pulisic has been there for some time. He's ingrained in the system. The Ziyech deal was completed a long time ago, so he's going to be within constant consultation with Frank Lampard. Werner was done some time ago. Havertz has just come in. Werner and Havertz will work fantastically well together. And at defence, look, I really rate the Thiago Silva signing. I think he had a brilliant season. Who was the second best team in Europe last year, Paris Saint-Germain. But I didn't even know about the Malang Sarr signing. Chelsea have strengthened at every single area of the pitch, especially when Edouard Mendy comes in. They are. I mean, honestly, having heard about the Malang Sarr signing, I think they're a lot closer than I initially did. No, they're not going to challenge that top two, in my opinion. That's Liverpool and City to lose. But in terms of best of the rest, I think Chelsea are comfortably ahead of Manchester United, Frank Lampard or not. And I am excited going forward for this year.
Yeah, and Carl, I guess I'll ask you about Frank Lampard here, because now this is year 2 on the job, and he has quite the riches of players that he can now call upon. Is there how much? I mean, there's obviously how much pressure would you put on Frank Lampard to kind of succeed with this team? And do you think they'd ever turn on him? Should there be bad results? Do you think there could be? Should he be on guard that his job could go as if with a couple of bad results here and there? You're on mute, my friend.
There we go. I think there's going to be tremendous pressure on him, given that earlier at the bottom we had all the top signings in the Premier League scrolling, and I think 5 of them were Chelsea's, up there with like Ake, etc. And you know my opinion on that. But I think given the amount of money that was spent and the kind of how impressed a lot of people were about how Frank Lampard dealt with the younger players in his squad, people are going to expect a lot this season. People are going to expect results. We want the bang for the buck. We want to show that money is going to go to winning results. And if he doesn't do that, I don't know. It's quite hard because Frank Lampard is just adored amongst Chelsea fans. I think it's going to be quite hard for Chelsea fans to actually turn on him because he's just a legend in terms of the club. So it's gonna be interesting to see if Chelsea fans are going to flip and might go, maybe he's not the one we need for us. But as we said, throughout the season, we're saying that Lampard is kind of the one that's bringing more club spirit to the club than they've had in a while. So if he's going to be the manager that doesn't do as well but still has the support of the fans, it's going to be him if it's going to be anyone.
Yeah, and we'll touch upon our predictions of various categories towards the end. I have a feeling a lot of Chelsea players or Chelsea themselves will turn up in those categories. We'll Leicester next, but I want to group them with Wolves and Everton in terms of best of the non-traditional top 6. So we'll just skip to Spurs briefly. Signed Pierre-Emile Højbjerg from Southampton for 15 million. Obviously lost Carl Walker-Peters to the same team for 12 million. Also got Joe Hart on a free deal from Burnley, and Matt Doherty from Wolves for about 16 million pounds. Joe Spanioli, I personally have not been. I don't have Amazon Prime, so I've not been watching the Spurs All or Nothing documentary that has made a lot of headlines. But do you predict Spurs to have a bit of a bounce back year and kind of challenge for that, push the 4 teams we mentioned earlier, push them hard for top 4 spot? Or do you think they'll kind of get to a 5th or 6th spot and not really push on further?
Well, I mean, spoilers, I don't even have them finishing that high. And even though I do have Amazon Prime, I will not be watching the Tottenham Hotspur All or Nothing thing because the clips I've seen, quite frankly, it looks absolutely comatose. I've not been impressed by the business they've made. I really don't rate the fit of Jose Mourinho at the club. Yeah, I mean, there's not really a huge amount to say about Tottenham Hotspur on my end. All I know is that they're desperately trying to sign Eric Milik from Napoli, and he will almost certainly be staying now, which means that their striker problems, the regression of Harry Kane, the constant search for a backup that just keeps on failing. I do not have much hope for Tottenham Hotspur. I've not been impressed by them for some time. They've just lost who was probably still their best defender, Jan Vertonghen. I don't think there's going to be much development there. I personally have them outside the top 6. I'm probably a minority opinion, but I do not have high hopes for Spurs coming into this season.
Okay, so Cam, where do you, in response to that, I guess, where do you have Spurs? What do you make of them heading into the season?
I don't think I'm as pessimistic as Joe. I think I definitely agree with that. I think they are sort of that fifth, sixth spot. I don't think they're a Champions League. So the side's not a Champions League side. I don't think Mourinho has quite got both the players that he necessarily wants. For Mourinho, he is a big spender in the transfer market. This has been rather unspectacular. I mean, Doherty and Højbjerg, I do think are two players that kind of fill gaps that Tottenham have had, especially Højbjerg. They haven't had that holding midfielder since they let go of Moussa Dembele. I think he'll add a lot of quality to the team. We saw how good Doherty is in a very sort of similar way to Trent Alexander-Arnold, not just in defending, but also going up front, providing those assists as well. But I think the problem, as Joe kind of said as well, is the lack of depth as well. The defense isn't strong enough. There needs to be better quality players there and more depth. There's no replacement to Harry Kane or to Son either. And so, yeah, here's the thing with Mourinho, and here's the thing that I think is kind of keeping them higher for me. Whilst they're very unspectacular, since Mourinho's come in, if you just take the league table since he's come in, he'd be fourth. And there's just a real consistency, just not a real sort of spectacular performance that's going to take them towards those top four spots. So I think if Tottenham can get that back up, get that depth, maybe they'll be going back to top four. But this doesn't look like the team that was competing for the title that reached the Champions League final under Mauricio Pochettino. It does rather look like a damp squib in comparison. And I think that's a shame, considering the sort of trajectory they were on in recent years.
Yeah, and you can imagine they've also taken a financial hit with the new stadium and not having fans in there as well. So you can imagine that's affected their summer. Going to the other North London team, Carl, you mentioned you'd been watching Arsenal so far. I'll just quickly rattle off their summer business. Obviously, they've signed Gabriel Magalhaes. I think I've pronounced that right or wrong. Magalhaes, there you go. Thanks, Joe. From Lille for around £24 million. Obviously scored on his debut already, so great start from him. Willian on a free from Chelsea again. I think he's had 2 assists in this game, so he's obviously hit the ground running as well. Pablo Mari, they signed on a permanent deal. Cedric Suarez as well, and then they brought back Dani Ceballos on loan. Outgoing, I guess the big one, Mkhitaryan went to Roma on a free deal, and then Mavropanos. Oh goodness, I can't pronounce his name. Konstantinos Mavropanos. I'm gonna just run with that. Stuttgart loan deal as well. So, Carl, you mentioned you'd watched Arsenal so far today. Are you? I mean, again, similar to the Chelsea question. If you were an Arsenal fan, how excited would you be heading into this season?
I'd be very optimistic, especially just watching this game. Like I said again, it's just Fulham at this point, but Fulham aren't necessarily the biggest pushovers of any side I've ever watched. And they seem well drilled. They seem a bit more clinical than they used to be. There's also a bit more flair coming from the side. Like where you see them playing well, they're playing really like well thought out football. But you're also seeing like a bit of sort of magic coming from players here and there, having a bit of like expression from the players as well. It's actually quite good to watch from Arsenal at the moment. Like, I've just whipped up now just in case something interesting is happening, but it's all looking good. I think they're also quite excited, especially with the performance today from their new signings. Like Gabriel's scoring today, that's just got to be an icing on a cake for an Arsenal supporter. Just thinking, and I've been in the Twitter sphere. I've seen what Arsenal fans have been saying, and they do seem relatively optimistic about what's been happening, and not too disappointed about the people who have left. And, you know, I think this could be quite a good season for Arsenal. And I think they are going to come out better than people are expecting.
Yeah, I mean, Cam, I refer it to you on Arsenal, I guess. We've been here before, kind of start of the season, fresh hopes for Arsenal. But it does, this season has a different feel to it. It does feel that there's a sense of optimism around the Emirates Stadium, and that maybe they won't get into the top 4, but they'll certainly kind of be on the upward trajectory and push those teams I've mentioned before, push them a lot closer than they've been able to since the Wenger departure.
Yeah, I mean, Arteta has done the one key thing that he needed to do when he became manager, was to get that side more organised. Because yes, you had the great attacking players, Aubameyang, Lacazette, but the defense was just not working out. It was leaking too many goals. It just couldn't get results. And I think Arteta really bringing in that organisation. And I think the value of those 2 cups that Arsenal won, the FA Cup and the Community Shield. I mean, the Community Shield isn't always seen as the biggest of cups, but just the motivation and the momentum that Arsenal have carried, particularly in, beating some of the bigger teams, beating Liverpool twice. That is a huge coup, really, for any team in Arsenal's position at the moment. I do think the signings have been good. Willian, I think, is another signing not many people have been talking about. I think we saw what he did at Chelsea. I think Chelsea will, even with all the players that they've brought in, I think he is someone that they may potentially regret letting go of. But yeah, I think for Arsenal, the only thing that could hold them, I think, going for top 4 is, I think, the fact that maybe they'll push for the Europa League. I think there's a real sense that they could win the Europa League, and that will be their closest step into the Champions League. And so maybe they'll put more resources towards that. But I think this is the most optimistic I think an Arsenal fan could be past Wenger, definitely.
Yeah, it does feel like that. It does feel that the 4 teams we've mentioned besides Liverpool, Man City, there's a sense of optimism at least. Well, maybe not Spurs, but maybe certainly Man United, Chelsea, and Arsenal seems to be a sense of optimism. So it could be fingers crossed, an exciting season at the top. We're gonna run through kind of the middle teams, I guess, just because there's not a whole. I feel like there's not a whole lot to get deep into. But Joe, I'll put these 3 teams together and package them into a question. So we've got Leicester, who's the big signing is Timothy Castagna from Atalanta, £22 million. The big out, obviously, Chilwell. I know they're looking at Wesley Fofana from Saint Etienne as well, a young defender from France. I'll put Wolves there as well. Wolves obviously made a big splash with 18-year-old Fabio Silva from Porto for £37 million. Obviously signed Marçal from Lyon for about £2 million or so, and Vitinha on loan. Outgoings being Doherty and Helder Costa to Leeds, who we'll discuss later. And then I'll throw Everton in the mix as well. Obviously signed Alan from Napoli, £23 million. James Rodriguez, Real Madrid, £20 million. And Decore from Watford. Outgoings, Leighton Baines, Kieran Dowell, Stecklenburg, Schneiderlin, Nias. So I've run through those quite quickly. So yeah, I'll acknowledge that. But those 3 teams, Leicester, Wolves, Everton, I guess widely considered to be the best of the rest if you take out the top 6. Which team excites you the most out of those 3 teams, Joe?
Everton.
Okay.
Everton, comfortably. I have Everton breaking into the top 6, believe it or not, this year. There's one of the best predictions I've seen, even though I personally don't rate him as a striker very much, is the idea that with the weapons at his disposal, Dominic Calvert-Lewin could just be about to have a 20-goal season in the Premier League, crazy though that sounds. I don't even need to talk about Carlo Ancelotti's resume, how well this has turned out for Everton, by the way. I know he hasn't had a brilliant season, but getting Alan for 25 million when he was rumoured to be going to PSG for over 100 million a couple of years ago, that is a fantastic deal. Of course, one of the very few players that didn't basically force Ancelotti out of Napoli last year. It makes sense to bring him in. Gattuso wants him gone. Fantastic signing at a cheap price, even if he doesn't have an amazing season. That's a much better deal than most of the midfield signings Everton have made. And if he doesn't work out, look, they've brought in Decore. They've basically overhauled their entire midfield this summer. I really rate what Everton have done. I think that they are in a really good position in terms of manager. I think Carlo Ancelotti is comfortably the best of this pocket of 3. As for Leicester and Wolves, yep, I have them in like 8th and 9th, that kind of area. The one thing I'll say about Wolves, I think it's very funny, is that they now have more Portuguese players in their team than I think 16 of the 20 teams in the Portuguese top division, Liga NOS. Wow. So Nuno Santo is definitely buying the players he wants.
And Jorge Mendes is certainly having an effect at Wolves. I guess, Cam, I'll throw you the same question of which of those 3 teams kind of excites you the most and you think it can make a push for Europe of those 3 between Leicester, Wolves and Everton?
I mean, Everton's the exciting one just because you've got the mix of Ancelotti, the work he's done already with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and the real creativity and stability he's brought into that midfield. Alan is a fantastic player. He's really going to play that holding midfield role well. James Rodriguez brings that creativity that Everton have really been lacking in recent years. Same with Decore as well. But as much as I think it's the most exciting one, I don't think it's going to be the best package out of those. I think Wolves, just because of that consistency, and it's a team that really does, it's played well over the years. It's really started to find its style. I think Nuno Espirito Santo has, as you said, he has all those Portuguese players that he wants. And I have them finishing 7th as a top of those 3 teams, really out more of the consistency and the fact they know how to get results as well. One of the best teams against the Big Six last year, especially, doing a double against Man City, that's not to be sniffed at. And Leicester, I'm potentially being very pessimistic on Leicester, but I think the combination of the Europa League, losing Ben Chilwell, and I think the fact that I don't think Jamie Vardy can replicate that season he had last year. I think Leicester are going to fall to the bottom of the top 10, potentially even out of it this season.
Oh wow, that feels like a bold prediction, and I'm not really sure why. It just feels like a very bold prediction. We will run through, I guess, the rest of the Premier League teams, starting with Sheffield United, who finished in 9th in the Premier League. Carl, I'll just quickly run through the signings. Wes Fotheringham has joined from Rangers on a free deal, and Ramsdale for 19 million from Bournemouth. Max Lowe, Jayden Bogle both joined from Derby. Oliver Burks joined from West Brom, and obviously Ethan Ampadu on loan from Chelsea. Outgoings, Callum Robinson to West Brom, Luke Freeman to Nottingham Forest, and then the likes of Ravel Morrison, Leon Clark, etc., and some others. Carl, Sheffield United, how do you think they'll go in year 2? Do you think there'll be a bit of regression and they might find it a struggle, or do you see them having enough to kind of get into that mid-table, close to top 10 kind of range? Mute again, my friend.
I really should pay attention this time. I don't know. I think at the beginning of this, like last season, everyone was like, "Wow, they're doing really well," but then it kind of sunk a bit. And I don't know if we're going to have the same kind of bang straight in the Premier, like straight in, getting the results we don't expect, or whether we're just going to get sort of mid-season, towards the end of the season, Sheffield, who are just kind of just going to sit in mid-table, not really putting out playing anything excited, just getting results here and there and just being surprising not that much at the time. I don't know, it's quite hard to call. I think you just I just stick them mid-table, just stick them 10th. That's why I think they're going to end up. I can't imagine anything more special from them this season, to be honest. But I can't imagine them going down too much. That's probably the most optimistic part of that. I can't imagine them going too far down.
Yeah. I think Chris Wilder will have a decent season. I think they'll finish around, like you said, around that 10th, 11th, 12th spot. To Burnley, we go next. Cam, Will Norris is the only signing that has been officially listed from Wolves. Joe Hart left on a free. Jeff Hendrick went to Newcastle on a free. Lennon's gone. Ben Gibson. Not a lot of change at Burnley. Do you see them? Because I've seen some predictions have them quite near the bottom of the table. Where do you see Burnley? How well do you think they'll do this season?
Well, it's just something about the way Sean Dyche organises that team. It's solid, it's unspectacular, but it's stable. And there's a reason Burnley are always near that top 10. Burnley can go through a massive run of form. I remember last season they were towards the relegation zone, but they just have that ability of grinding out results. And I was saying it with Nick Pope earlier, the fact that him in goal, just how great he's been able to really get those saves, keep those clean sheets, and get those points for Burnley. The defence as well, players like Tarkowski, it's a really well-drilled unit. And Chris Wood as well, 13 goals last season. He is becoming a very prolific attacker that is starting, again, to get those goals and also really be key to getting those results for Burnley. So Burnley, a solid, unspectacular season in mid-table. I think that's the thing. I think Sean Dyche, Eddie Howe, we always used to have that debate over, what one is the better manager in terms of the future. But I think one thing that really showed last season, the organisation that Sean Dyche has in that side, the way he has them as a cohesive unit, it keeps Burnley solid in mid-table. I can't see that changing this season.
There we go. So there's Burnley done. Joe, you in this lucky dip, you get Southampton. So incoming Kyle Walker-Peters, as we mentioned, 12 million from Spurs. Mohamed Salisu from Valladolid for 11 million. outgoing being Højbjerg, as we said, to Spurs, 15 million. Harrison Reed's gone to Fulham, as has Mario Lemina. Cedric Suarez, Maya Yoshida, those players have gone headed out. Another year with Ralph Hasenhuttl, and surely an improved Southampton, given they'll have another year with Ralph Hasenhuttl.
Yeah, I mean, you've basically answered the question before I even could. The most important name in that team is Ralph Hasenhuttl, one of the best managers in the league last year. I was extremely pessimistic about Southampton going into last season. I didn't think they played amazingly, but they proved me wrong. Nowhere near relegation for most of the season. Hasenhutl's going to get the best out of them. And although a lot of them had superlative seasons with how well he conditions his players, I don't see the likes of Danny Ings completely dropping off a cliff. And what you've also got to remember is that there were a lot of Southampton players last year who didn't have amazing seasons. You were touting Moussa Djenepo as one of the most important signings last year. Wasn't amazing. Che Adams didn't have a great season by any means. If they have good second seasons, this Southampton could be even better than the one that we saw last year. Yeah, I think of this like sort of mid-table contingent, I have Southampton towards the top, which I know makes Cam Hall very, very upset. But no, I'm optimistic about them. If they keep Hasenhuttl, that's what matters.
Yeah, I'm really hoping Moussa Djenepo really gets a good run of form, just to be proven right. Obviously, yeah, and I hope he doesn't turn out to be like a Sofiane Boufal, who's still not had that hit the mark for Southampton. Moving on. Yeah, there we go. Moving on to Newcastle. Cam, I know you. I mean, the takeover didn't happen, as we now know, and it's still legal action may still go underway. We don't really know what's quite happening with that. But talking about their transfer signings, I mean, Ryan Fraser, a free from Bournemouth, Jeff Hendrick, a free from Burnley, Callum Wilson, 20 million from Bournemouth, Jamal Lewis, 15 million from Norwich, and then not really losing many key players of note, except for maybe Rob Elliott or Florian Lejeune. Newcastle have had a surprisingly, to me, it seems like they've had a very good window. What do you make of their business this summer?
Yeah, it seems as soon as Mike Ashley is most ready to go is when he starts splashing the cash. But these signings are exceptional, and they're targeted in the right areas. Callum Wilson is just, last season, John Joe Shelby was their top scorer with 6 goals. That's unacceptable for even a club in the mid-table. So to have Callum Wilson come in, who has a really strong pedigree at Bournemouth, yes, he can be injury prone, but when he's on the pitch, he's making a difference. Ryan Fraser, really influential. He's got that link-up play that he built up with Callum Wilson as well. Jamal Lewis, I think, is very exciting. We saw flashes from him last season at Norwich. I think now he's in a much better team. I think we can really see him develop this season. I know you said my prediction with Leicester is bold, but I'm going to make an even bolder prediction here. Newcastle are breaking into the top 10. They're finishing above Leicester this season.
Josh, you're muted, but that pretty much sums up our response.
Well, I mean,
shock.
Yeah, speechless. No, I was going to say, I mean, it's going to ask a lot of Steve Bruce, but he's got a much improved team, so we'll see how that goes. Joe, we'll throw it to you for Crystal Palace. They've signed Nathan Ferguson, who we've interviewed on this channel before. Check that out. Eze from QPR for 16.5 million, and Batshuayi they've brought back on loan from Chelsea. No real outgoings there. Do we? It's almost like Tom Brady in the cliff theory. Do we think Roy Hodgson's? Do we think he's going to have a bad season soon, or do we still think he's got enough for this season at least?
Honestly, there is no team in this division that I have less to say about than Crystal Palace. I barely even remembered that they were in the Premier League last year. I've got them finishing 14th place, the most Crystal Palace kind of position you could imagine. They'll have, as long as they don't have an injury crisis, I suspect they'll be okay. The signings they've made, not particularly bad, although I do question spending 16 million on Etze. A free transfer for Nathan Ferguson kind of balances that out. That's an impressive signing, especially for someone who was coming up to the Premier League regardless. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more to say about Crystal Palace. I think they'll be okay, but they will be okay because there are worse teams in the division, not because they play particularly well. Right,
and we'll move on from Joe's lack of enthusiasm for Crystal Palace.
I forget they're in the Premier League. They're just so forgettable.
Well, we'll move swiftly on to Carl's excitement for Brighton, the Graham Potter revolution. In comes Adam Lallana on a free deal from Liverpool. Jensen Weir signed on a 500k deal from Wigan, and Joel Veltman, 900k from Ajax. Out went Knockout to Fulham for about 11 million. Aaron Moy's gone to Shanghai. Shane Duffy's gone to Celtic on loan. David Button's left West Brom for 1 million. Let's see. Martin Montoya's gone to Real Betis. Glenn Murray's gone to Watford loan, and a few other players as well. Carl, I mean, Graham Potter's really, making some moves, making some changes, getting maybe some might say getting rid of some of the fringe players in the team. A lot of people predicted Brighton in that relegation, that bottom three. I assume you don't. How high is Brighton's ceiling, do you think, this season as a Brighton fan?
I'm quite excited. This is probably the most excited I've been about Brighton before a season. Most seasons I'm kind of like, oh, they might go down again. But this season I'm genuinely putting them up for like a mid-table battle. I think we might even sit sort of between sort of 15th and 12th. I'm really excited for this season. Like, I think Lallana's going to add kind of the experience that we've needed, especially now we're losing Glenn Murray, which is actually quite sad, to be honest. But I'm so excited. We brought in so many good players for such a reasonable amount of money. I mean, come on, Veltman for 900k. That is brilliant. And I don't think he's even going to start. I don't think we're probably going to have at the back probably White, Dunk, and Webster, and I think Veltman's just a bench option. Like, we have genuinely good options now, and as you said, we've got rid of some of the fringe players, which I think we as Brighton fans, given the kind of the mentality of the club and of the fans, we kind of feel like we kind of hold on to our players. We see them as like a squad, and like they're one of our own. Like, we didn't want to see Knockout go. We never really want to see any of our players, but it's just how it has to be. And I think the fact that we've sort of taken a step, got rid of them, brought in some new, not necessarily fresh, but good players, I'm really excited for the team. And as for Ben White, that's going to be an exciting thing to watch. I think we're gonna see the story of how Ben White is going to progress. And man, this season is going to be so good. I think we're going to lack a striker, though. I think a striker will be an interesting thing. We might bring in another striker, but we're going to work with the strikers we have, which is nice, which is good, but it didn't exactly work too well for us last season. But I've got big hopes for Maupay, though. I think Maupay might have a better season this year. Let's see what happens. I'm just so excited for this season.
Well, I'm going to ask everyone for their young player to watch later on in the season. I can already tell Ben White is probably going to be your pick in that category. We'll move on to West Ham. I don't know. I mean, Joe, do you want West Ham? I'll give you West Ham. Talk about a team another exciting London team. They've signed Thomas Souček permanently on a 15 million deal from Slavia Prague. And then they are chasing James Tarkowski quite heavily. I think they've bid £30 million for him, and I don't know if that's going to work or not. In terms of outgoings, they've had Jeremy Ngakia go to Watford for free. Pablo Zabaleta, Carlos Sanchez have left. Ayeti's gone to Celtic. Roberto's gone to Valladolid. And then obviously the big one was probably Grady Diangana, who's gone to West Brom. We'll talk about West Brom in a bit, but West Ham, you feel like of all the teams that needed a big summer, it was them, and yet they haven't. So where do you see? I mean, do we have West Ham in the bottom 5 ahead of this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think West Ham United are in trouble. David Moyes is still the manager, I think, at the moment. I do not like their midfield whatsoever. It seems like Pellegrini tried to put a project together of something progressive. David Moyes came in and put together one of the most negative midfields I've ever seen. Mark Noble, Thomas Souček, and a couple of others thrown in there. It's just not interesting whatsoever. It's funny that the position that's been the biggest issue at West Ham for about 10 years is, of course, striker. Ayeti, complete failure. He's gone on loan to Celtic. They did not use him well whatsoever. Sebastian Haller had a pretty bad season in terms of how he was utilised. I don't see that changing. West Ham, yeah, I'm extremely pessimistic going into this season, as I am for a lot of teams, it sounds like this afternoon. But no, I do not have much hope for West Ham United whatsoever. This is a team that, we've now got players mutinying against the board, not just the fans. Things are going to get worse before they get better down at the London Stadium.
Yes. I mean, to move on from that sober note, we're going to go, Cam, I'll throw to you Aston Villa. They've signed Matty Cash from Nottingham Forest for about 14.5 million. They made a big money signing of Ollie Watkins from Brentford for 28 million pounds. I know they're also chasing Milo Rashica. There's a lot of reports in Germany that they are heavily courting him. In terms of outgoings, I guess the big ones, Baston's gone to Leganes and James Chester's gone to Stoke. But again, fringe players. Probably Aston Villa, they were very close to going down, and it came down to the final days. So I guess, and they've managed to keep Jack Grealish as well, we should add. How much of Aston Villa's fortunes in the league table kind of rest on Jack Grealish's shoulders?
I think a lot of them do. I think Jack Grealish is, without a doubt, there is a gulf between Jack Grealish and a lot of the players in that team, not just in the quality, but in terms of him as captain as well, in terms of the leadership and, all the noises coming out after lockdown when it resumed. It's very clear he is the key player, and Dean Smith was very keen to keep him. I think them staying up has really given them a good chance. And I think there's a sense that the transfer talk on Grealish hasn't been as hot this summer. And I almost think now Aston Villa have stayed up that season. I think there's a real optimism that they can build something at least this season, and Grealish can really be at the forefront developing them. I think Ollie Watkins was a fantastic signing. Saw him in the Championship last season, and really, I think Brentford deserved to go up just on his efforts alone at times. And I think that he's really got that quality, and if him and Grealish can combine, the defence is still a worry for Aston Villa. Tom Heaton is not the goalkeeper he was 4 or 5 years ago. It is still a bit shaky there. But I think certainly if he can keep Jack Grealish, which I think he is now more likely to do than not Dean Smith, and if he can use Ollie Watkins well, I think Villa will be safer than they were last year. I still think it will be close to them going down. They'll still be in that battle, but I don't think it will go down to the last day their survival this year.
Okay, cool. We'll ask everyone for their relegation bottom three predictions in a bit. Joe, here's one you might be excited to talk about. Leeds United with Marcelo Bielsa. Meslier has signed on a permanent deal for 6 million from Lorient. They obviously signed Rodrigo, 27.7 million from Valencia. Robin Koch from Freiburg for 12 million. Permanent capture of Elder Costa from Wolves for 16.3 million. And then they've also got Jack Harrison back on loan from Manchester City. Marcelo Bielsa, we've always, he's been the man, the myth, the legend with his famous tactics. How excited are you to see him in the Premier League with Leeds United?
I'm far more excited to see Marcelo Bielsa than Leeds, although I do think having a little bit of Yorkshire evil back in the Premier League is something we've been waiting for some time. Really, it's a similar case to Southampton. The most important man is the manager, and that's Marcelo Bielsa, one of the hardest working managers that you'll ever find. I think of the three teams coming up, they're the ones I have the most hope of strong survival for. I mean, again, just some of the signings they've brought in. I know it reeks of teams like Fulham and Aston Villa in the past who've spent massive amounts of money and really not done well, but they haven't had great managers like Marcelo Bielsa. So, I mean, failing a massive disappointment, I actually think Leeds are fairly safe. I say that carefully, but fairly safe in the Premier League this year. I have a lot of hope for them. There's a lot of hope for Calvin Phillips as well, as a player that's really impressed in the Championship, who could hopefully translate that to the Premier League. Yeah, I think Leeds are going to be pretty damn fine this year. Definitely the best of the top three in the Championship.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, and I'm going to make an assumption that none of us have them in the bottom three. At least that's that's my opinion. Cam, I'll just talk to you quickly about West Brom. They've signed Grady Diangana from West Ham. They got Mateus Pereira back on the permanent deal, which is huge for them, I would say. David Button's joined from Brighton, Cedric Keeper and Callum Robinson from Sheffield United. Obviously, they've lost some experience in Gareth Barry, Chris Brunt. They've lost Nathan Ferguson, as we've mentioned, John Lecco, Oliver Burke. With West Brom, Cam, it feels like they've got Slaven Bilic, a manager who's managed in the Premier League. They're not it feels like they are kind of equipped to stay up in the Premier League. It's just a case of, do they have enough quality? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't think West Brom should be in the Premier League this season. I think Brentford should have come second, should have taken that automatic promotion place. I think that they were just very uninspiring in the Championship for me. And look, Slaven Bilic is a great manager. And obviously, we saw the work he did at West Ham. Obviously, there was the fallout with Dimitri Payet, which I don't think really endeared him to the fans at all. Then, obviously, he's got a good record as well with Croatia. So he does have experience at the highest level. And yes, Grady Diangana is a good signing. I think he's someone that's going to be exciting. He did well in Championship for them last season. But yeah, they have the tools, but the tools aren't just of a good quality. I think it's just going to be rather blunt for them. And I can't see them really coming off the bottom.
There we go. And then finally, to wrap up, Carl, you get Fulham, who you've been watching a little bit of. Big signing for them, I guess, is old Brighton favourite Anthony Knockaert, who signed on a permanent deal for 10.8 million. They've also got Anthony Robinson from Wigan for 2 million, Harrison Reed from Southampton, Kenny Tet from Lyon, Lamina also from Southampton on loan, Alfonso Areola from PSG on loan, and Ola Aina they signed last night on loan from Torino. Outgoing Alfie Mawson, Marcus Bettinelli, and a few others. Fulham, I mean, you've watched a bit of them. They've obviously taken a different approach to when they were last in the Premier League. Are they? How optimistic would you be about them surviving?
I'm relatively optimistic, but I have a soft spot because of Knockout. I hate that because I'm a Brighton fan, but it just happens. It's quite hard to call. I don't know whether they're just going to yo-yo, which seems quite likely for Fulham. They have looked strong in the Championship. They have looked good at times, but also no one really expected them to be promoted, especially over Brentford, and they're going to have a hard time. And I think all of this is going to come down, whether they stay up or go down, it will be because of how the manager is going to manage them. And against Arsenal, they looked incredibly uninspiring. Granted, against a good Arsenal appearance, I'm not too confident for Fulham.
All right, so with that, that's all the 20 Premier League teams we've rattled through. So I guess time for predictions, and we'll start with top 6 predictions. So everyone, I think, has had a bit of time to kind of put them together. We'll start with Joe. I mean, you mentioned you had Everton breaking into that top 6, I believe. In what order do you have the top of the table?
Okay, winning the Premier League title, retaining it, Liverpool Football Club, followed by Manchester City within 5 points behind. Third place, I've got Chelsea, followed by Manchester United in 4th. 5th, Arsenal will just miss out on Champions League places, and breaking into the top 6, Carlo Ancelotti's Everton.
All right, so Cam, you're up next. How closely does your order mesh with Joe's?
So, same top 4, maybe slightly different positions. I've gone with City winning the league just from Liverpool. It's only going to be 1 or 2 points in it. Slightly farther gap back to Chelsea and Man United. I think they're going to be very close. Chelsea 3rd, Man United 4th. And then again, a slight gap down to Tottenham in 5th. Arsenal just behind in 6th.
All right, and then wrapping it up, Carl, do you have a top 6 for me?
So I'm actually this is actually quite funny. So I've gone for exactly the same as Mr. Spagnoli. So Liverpool winning, City, Chelsea, United, Arsenal, and Everton. But I'm really uncertain about predicting Chelsea over United. I think that's probably going to be the closest call out of the entirety of the league. I can't really call that one. But yeah, no, I on my sheet I wrote Chelsea United, then scribbled out I wrote United Chelsea, and then scribbled out again and wrote Chelsea United. So I can't really call that one. But I went with Chelsea over United, but for this time. But who knows?
There we go. I am a Liverpool fan, but I have City edging them to the title. I have City, Liverpool, Chelsea, United, Tottenham, Arsenal. So similar to Cam's predictions there for top 6. In terms of the bottom 3, I guess I'm happy to start with that one. I have Villa, West Brom, and Fulham in that order, I guess, from 18th to 20th. So that would be my bottom 3. Carl, surely you don't have Brighton there, but who do you have in your bottom three?
No, obviously I don't have Brighton there. This is quite hard. There's honestly like 7 people, like teams I think I'm going to go down. But I've put it down to West Ham, West Brom, and Fulham.
Okay, there we go. So Cam, how does your bottom three look?
So I've gone Fulham, just missing out on survival in 18th. Much to your disappointment, Carl, I've gone Brighton in 19th and West Brom far on the bottom in 20th.
Carl, you should just clip this out and just send it to Graham Potter for some inspiration. Joe, how does your bottom three look?
18th place, missing out by actually a considerable margin, West Ham United. 19th, Fulham. 20th, West Brom.
All right, so I guess we all have the two of the three promoted teams except Leeds in the bottom three. Moving on to the Golden Boot winner. Last year it was Jamie Vardy who took the honour. This year, Cam, who do you have as your Golden Boot winner?
I don't know if it's too predictable, but Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. I think he's key to that Arsenal team getting up and getting back into the top four, getting back into that sort of fight for Europe. We've seen the momentum over just the last couple of months, really, since lockdown, the way he's been carrying that team and scoring those key goals. I can't see it being anyone else.
Okay, Carl, I'd be very surprised if it'd be very optimistic for you to pick Neil Maupay as the Golden Boot winner, but besides from him, who have you got? You're on mute again, my friend.
Muted.
There we go.
Yeah, it'd be quite funny if I was like, yeah, obviously Aaron Connolly is going to win Golden Boot, but I think it's going to be Aubameyang. I completely agree. I just think he's just so quality consistently against every single team I watch him against. He's just an excited player, and you just can't stop scoring.
Yeah, I do have Aubameyang. I guess the second name that came to mind was Harry Kane, but I'm still not sure about the service towards him in that Tottenham attack. Joe, are you going to make a clean sweep and give it to Aubameyang, or have you got another name?
Yeah, it's a clean sweep. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang for the Golden Boot, simply because I don't think there's another team in the top six as reliant on goal scoring on just one player. However, I will say, if they have a good season and if they get the best out of him, Dominic Calvert-Lewin will run him close.
Ooh, there we go. There's one to watch. Signing of the season is the next category. Carl, let's swing it to you. There is actually a strong argument that if Adam Lallana can produce his Southampton form, he would be the signing of the season. But who have you got?
Yeah, no, I've written a bit of a list. I also like Alan Down for Everton. I also had Veltman because of just how surprisingly cheap he was. But yeah, no, I actually put Lallana down because if he produces what we want him to produce, he could be huge for Brighton, and I think he could be like a big part of why Brighton might not be going down next season. Interesting.
Yeah. Joe, who have you got as the signing of the season?
Okay, so I don't necessarily think it's going to be the best outright player of all the players
Sure.
signed in the Premier League. I've chosen someone who I think is going to have a big impact at a good fee, who's going to improve the team. Gabriel Magalhaes for Arsenal.
There we go. I mean, is he the defender that Arsenal have been crying out for, do you reckon?
He is a defender, and that's what Arsenal have been crying out for a long time. Gabriel Magalhaes, signing of the season, because it's happened.
Oh my goodness. Actually, I'm not surprised by your response, really. I shouldn't be.
Let's clip that for the Instagram. That's good.
Yeah, we should. Cam, I don't know how you follow that up, but who have you got as your signing of the season?
It's a tough one for me. I think there's two real candidates for this, both not the big money signings of the summer. I think the first one is similar way to kind of what Joe was saying about the need for a defender at Arsenal. Thiago Silva at Chelsea. He's going to provide that leadership in the defence they've been missing since John Terry. And I think that is why, for me, they're going to finish above United, because he's going to provide just that real solidity in defence that will just bring those frailties that they had last season down. But also, and I know I was going about Newcastle earlier, but Callum Wilson at Newcastle, I'm really excited to see what he can do. He has that pedigree from his Bournemouth days, and Newcastle, I think, is a team that's going to give him much better service. And I'm really excited to see what he can do. And I'm really optimistic he can get 10, possibly even 20 goals. If he doesn't get injured. That's the only big if with Callum Wilson, because that is a big likelihood.
Yeah. I think this category is quite wide open. I think there's a lot of names you can throw in there. I'm going to throw similar to your Callum Wilson one. I really like. I mean, Ryan Fraser. It was not long ago that he was up there with the top assist getters in the Premier League, and so I feel like if Steve Bruce can get the best out of him, he'd be a very good signing for a free deal. And I really like Robin Koch at Leeds. I think for 12 million, he's a very accomplished centre back. You know, I mean, I think I don't know. I can't remember exactly, and Carl can correct me on how much Brighton wanted for Ben White, but I feel like Robin Koch is a very good plan B for them to get. And so I'm excited to see him in the Premier League. Putting my Bundesliga bias aside, young player to watch. Carl, I mean, we know yours, so you might as well tell us.
Yeah, Ben White, obviously. Who isn't watching him? Every single top 6 club has their eye on Ben White. They asked about his availability last season. Leeds are just crying because they don't have him. Everyone wants this player, and I'm so excited to see what he does this season.
All right. Joe, who have you got for your young player to watch?
I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold is always going to be on the list, but I wanted to choose someone different. Phil Foden. Simple as that. I mean, I think we've already talked about why he's going to be a crucial part of that City team this year. So creative, so talented. He should have been in the team a hell of a lot earlier than he is. Young player to watch. I just want to see Phil Foden have a full season.
Yeah, there's a strong argument there. Cam, you were singing Phil Foden's praises earlier as well. Do you have him as your young player to watch, or have you got another name?
Yeah, exact same reason as Joe. I think not because we know Phil Foden's got the quality. He's not there to watch for that. But it's, can he live up to that potential? Can he live up to all of the real hype that's been around him? I think he can. I think he's going to be fantastic this season and really grow into the role that he's going to take up really as that replacement for David Silva at Man City.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mo Salisu at Southampton. I feel like Southampton have a good pedigree for centre-backs. I feel like, and I know, Joe, you've seen him in La Liga as well. He's fast, he's strong, he's powerful. I feel like he'll be a really good centre-back for Southampton to have at that spot. 2 more left in terms of our Premier League predictions. Team that will exceed expectations, and I guess I'll quantify it by saying, by expectations, I mean, I guess, their league position from last year. It can be the kind of grouping you have them in. A team that will kind of will do as advertised. So, for example, I will put it's very hard because I don't know where many people expect Leeds to finish. But in terms of kind of fringe top 10 team, I have them there. So I guess I'll put them there for mine. Joe, do you have a team? I mean, you've mentioned Everton to break into the top 6. I guess, is that team you would put in the category?
I mean, I think a lot of people expect Everton to be a lot better this year, considering the signings that they've made. It's going to come as a surprise to a couple of you. The team I've got in this category is Brighton.
I knew you were going to say that, Joe.
I don't know if I'm going to run through my full table predictions that I've jotted down over the last couple of years, but I have Brighton considerably higher up the table than a lot of us do because of Graham Potter. I think there is I know he hasn't got the achievements in this country to prove it. I think there is a genuine case to say that Graham Potter is the best English manager going at the moment. Certainly better than Eddie Howe, who used to have that title. It's him or Sean Dyche. You know, what he achieved in Sweden alone is impressive enough. I think Brighton are going to have a very impressive season. Just watch them finish 19th after I've said that.
I think
don't say that.
I think Roy Hodgson or Sean Dyche may have just kind of awoken there and just heard something in the wind. We will. If you have got your full table prediction down, we can rattle through that at the end.
In a bit,
Carl. I don't. Yeah. What team do you have exceeding expectations? I guess. In the table.
You probably expect me to say Brighton, but I'm sort of grouping these two as teams that people are going to be way stronger than people might expect. I think Southampton are going to do way better than people think. I think, especially with their performance at the end of the last season, if they can continue having the sort of the strength, and if Ings continues to be absolutely mentally good, Southampton are going to exceed everyone's expectations and do way better, as will Brighton and as will Everton. But I think Southampton will probably be the most surprising out of all of those.
Yeah, Cam.
I think no surprise given my early, slightly optimistic prediction for Newcastle, but I just think those couple of signings, and I think there's that real sense of optimism. I think there's going to be a takeover this season. And I think with that takeover, with these new players coming in, I think it will just give a boost to the club that I think is really going to reverberate onto performances on the pitch. So I'm really interested to see what that's going to be like, but I think it'll be a good season for them, definitely.
There we go. Newcastle again. They were a team I had on my mind as well, for sure. They've made some good signings. I guess the opposite at the end of the spectrum is teams that will kind of fall short of expectations. I guess again, same thing. League position from last year. I guess the general groupings people have them in. So I'll say mine, and I think Sheffield United will take a step back. I don't think they'll be necessarily in trouble, but I have them in that 11th to 14th kind of category. A few steps back. Nothing that they've done wrong. I think it's just second season. Teams may have worked out how to play against them, and obviously teams around them have strengthened. So I have Sheffield United. Cam, who would you put in this category?
I think just compared to how they were playing last year, and I think really based off their form post-lockdown, there were some very alarming signs starting to creep into Leicester at the end of last season. And with the distraction of the Europa League as well, Jamie Vardy, I don't think is going to have the same season. Leicester are going to fall a lot short of where they were last season.
Okay. Joe?
In terms of net positions lost down the table, Sheffield and Leicester are two that I've already highlighted. For the Timothy Castagna signing at Leicester is just one I don't understand. He's not a left back. If they're using him to replace Chilwell, that is borderline suicidal defensively. But in terms of the team that are going to disappoint us the most, it will come as no surprise after what I said earlier that I've got West Ham on this list. I do not have any hope for that team going into this season. They won't finish that far behind where they were last year because they were so far down the table last year. So yeah, West Ham United.
Carl?
So ignore how much joy this may bring me, but I think Palace. Given how through most of last season we were all sitting there being like, Palace are doing well, Palace are looking strong, Palace are holding up their end really well. But then towards the end of the season, they went 8 games, they lost 7 of them and drew 1 of them. How do you go from being looked at as so solid to then being catchable by Brighton? It was really confusing to watch them drop so hard last season, and I genuinely think I put them just above going down last year, but they might even go down this year. I'm really not confident for Palace at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Palace, the key for me is Batshuayi and seeing how well he adapts, because I can't see them relying on Jordan Ayew for goals and for a second straight year. I think that would be dangerous from my point of view. So I guess to wrap up, and we'll do some quick fire European football predictions after this. It won't take too long, but I guess final Premier League standings. I don't know if you guys have all drafted one or whether you've got groupings, but I'll rattle through mine quickly. I've got City winning, Liverpool second, Chelsea, Man United in top 4, Spurs, Arsenal 5th and 6th. I've got Wolves 7th. I've got Everton 8th, Leicester 9th, Southampton 10th. Then I guess second half of the table, I've got Leeds 11th, Sheffield United 12th, Newcastle 13th, Burnley 14th, Palace 15th. West Ham 16th, Brighton 17th, Villa 18th, West Brom 19th, Fulham 20th. So that's mine. Joe, you mentioned you had yours there. Do you want to run through them?
Yeah, I'll cancel myself and get it wrong just quickly. Liverpool holding on to their Premier League title over Manchester City, less than 5 points behind. Chelsea coming home a strong 3rd, some distance ahead of Manchester United in 4th, who just pip Arsenal to the 4th and final Champions League spot. Everton breaking into the top 6th, a little way ahead of the Lusophonic Kings Wolves in 7th. Tottenham Hotspur having a dreadful season in 8th. Southampton continuing to improve in 9th, with Leicester City falling to 10th with defensive issues. Brighton, surprising us all, coming home in 11th place, just ahead of Sean Dyche's Burnley. Newcastle coming in strong 13th, ahead of the team I keep forgetting were in the Premier League, Crystal Palace in 14th. Sheffield United having an actually good season, but just not as good as last year, finishing 15th. Leeds United in 16th, ahead of a disappointing but somehow surviving Aston Villa. 18th place for West Ham United, ahead of Fulham and West Bromwich Albion.
There we go. So a few differences. And yes, as you said, well, let's watch the internet come at us with these predictions when we get them wrong. Cam, do you have? I mean, full disclosure, I didn't ask these guys to put together full table projections, but do you have a list of 20?
Yeah, I've got a list of 20. So City first, Liverpool just 1 or 2 points behind them, going down to the final day. Chelsea, Man United a little more distance behind, again very close between the two of them. And then Tottenham and Arsenal, again, missing out on top 4, but it's going to be very close, I think, between them, 5th and 6th. Wolves, not far behind in 7th. Everton, not really far behind Wolves, going to be a point or 2 in it as well. They're probably both very unlucky to miss out on European football. Newcastle, shock of the season for me. They're coming in 9th. There'll be a gap between them and Everton, but I can just see them with the goals coming through. That's where they'll be. Leicester, the dip of the Europa League, their defensive issues fall down to 10th. Burnley, solid and stable under Sean Dyche, coming in 11th. Southampton, don't think Danny Ings will be as prolific. Yes, Hasenhüttl will do them well, coming in 12th. Sheffield won't be as good as last season, though still grinding out those results to come in 13th. Leeds will both be spectacularly good and spectacularly bad to come in 14th. West Ham, again, all the problems they have at the moment, but just enough to stay up in 15th. Aston Villa, Jack Grealish and Ollie Watkins starting to get that partnership working, keep them up in 16th. Crystal Palace, I mean, they will be so lucky, literally 1 or 2 points between Palace in 17th and Fulham in 18th. But it'll probably be Palace just grinding out a couple of results here and there. And a small fall behind that to Brighton, 3 or 4 points off the relegation zone, certainly putting in a good effort to stay up. And then West Brom about 5 to 10 points off Brighton. I just don't see them coming anywhere near.
There we go. And Carl, I noticed you're scribbling there. Do you have a 20? No worries if you don't. But
I don't have a 20, but I kind of have like so I've like grouped a few at the top and grouped a few at the bottom in an order. So as I said before, Liverpool winning, City, Chelsea, United, Arsenal, Everton. Then I put Tottenham just behind Everton and Wolves following. But at the bottom of the table, I sort of said I think I'm going to put West Brom at 20th, then Fulham at 19th, then West Ham at 17th, but then just escaping relegation. I think put Crystal Palace above them, Aston Villa, then above Aston Villa I'd say Leeds, Sheffield at, I think I'm at 15th now, maybe, and then just above Sheffield I put Brighton. So
there we go.
Not an entirety, but I've got the bottom and top kind of gauged, let's say.
I mean, you've made the wisest move in terms of, not tethering yourselves to predictions that will then haunt you for the next year. So I think you've made the wise move there.
Like when everyone predicted Brighton to go down last year. Just say.
Yeah, exactly. We'll quickly run through European full predictions. I know, Joe. I mean, we had a look at it earlier. La Liga starts this weekend as well. Looks like it's Real Madrid's title to lose. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the story in La Liga this year is not going to be about Real Madrid, who I do think are going to hold on to the title. They don't even need to make that many signings, honestly. They've got enough youth players coming through. The transition in midfield's working really well. Eden Hazard's turned up to pre-season training overweight, but he was pretty awful for most of last season, and they still look fantastic without him. The real story in La Liga this year is what the hell is going to happen with Barcelona, who, if this situation continues to get worse, I can see finishing out of the top 4. People consistently underrate how good teams sort of 4th down to 10th in La Liga are. Sevilla could finish ahead of Barcelona. Sociedad could finish ahead of Barcelona if they get their season going. Villarreal have made a couple of good signings. They could finish ahead of Barcelona. Atletico have improved to finish it in second place, but there is a very real chance that Barcelona do not make top 4 in La Liga this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Cam, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much I mean, I don't. You're a European footballer. I have no idea. But what have you made of kind of the Barcelona saga? And again, do you have Real Madrid? Would you have them as favourites to win in La Liga?
Yeah, I just don't think there's anyone else strong enough in the league. I mean, I don't think any of these teams are at the peak of their powers that they've been in this decade. But I think the Barcelona situation, it is just how the whole decade really of just how much it has collapsed. I think the biggest sign of the issues they've got at Barcelona is La Masia, the youth academy, and the fact, Fati's really the only good youth player to come out of La Masia in the last decade, when it had been producing the likes of Puyol, Messi, Xavi, Iniesta in the decade before. Something is up at that club. And Carlos Perez, yeah, I mean, so I'm not the most averse to the Masia, but I think what I will say is that Barcelona, I don't think they'll fall out the top four, but I think there will be teams. Sevilla, I think, will have a great season. Villarreal, I'd be interested to see what Unai Emery does. Real Sociedad, I think, are a real dark horse. They've got David Silva now, a man who really knows the peak of his powers. He knows, I think he can really get that team going. And they were strong as well last season. But for me, it is Real's titles to lose. I'm going top four, Real, Atleti. I'm going to say Sevilla, Barcelona, and Sociedad just behind.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on that. I mean, Sevilla signing Oscar Rodriguez is a really, really good signing, I think, and the experience of Rakitic in midfield, I think they've bolstered. Villarreal as well. Taki Kubo there on loan is a player I adore. Parejo, I think Villarreal are going to be a good signing. And Joe, I think it's convenient that Valencia have had a similar meltdown to Barcelona, but they're not Barcelona, so of course it's gone under the window.
Yeah, exactly. Similar to how Everton have been dreadful in the last couple of years in the Premier League, like before, like the whole Ancelotti thing. But Everton was so dreadful, but they managed to escape criticism because of how bad the likes of Arsenal and United were. That is what's happened to Valencia this summer. Cannot emphasise enough just what a mess that football club has been for the last year. Losing your best player to your city rivals, Villarreal, cannot be underestimated. Overstated just how embarrassing that is. Valencia could be bottom 5 this year, honestly.
Javi Gracia has gone from a Premier League relegation battle to a potential La Liga relegation battle, and it's fair to say that Valencia
still be better
not...
than Gary Neville, though.
I was going to say, you actually stole that joke. I was going to say, it's not like Gary Neville's at fault for any of this time round. I mean, Ligue 1 has already started. I don't think anyone else here would say anyone else but PSG in terms of winning the title. So we can probably skip through that unless Joe, do you have any thoughts on Ligue 1?
PSG are going to win it, unsurprisingly. However, their time at the top of European football, I feel like they've come to an end of a window, losing Thiago Silva. PSG was so good last year. I honestly believe PSG were better than Liverpool throughout last season and deserve to be in that Champions League final. They will fall a little bit this year. They've had their chance. They blew it. Winning Ligue 1, but ultimately not a fantastic season.
Yeah, as you mentioned, key outgoings. Cavani, Thiago Silva have left. In comes, Florenzi's joined from Roma as well on loan, so that should plug right back. They also lost Meunier to Dortmund as well. So yeah, PSG, I think we can all agree, probably going to win Ligue 1. I'm going to be rooting for Lyon as much as I can because that's the closest team I have in where I am. Bundesliga starts next week, and that's kind of that's league I adore a lot. But again, Cam, Bayern Munich was so good in the Champions League. They have to be favourites in Germany again.
Yeah, what Hansi Flick has done since he's took over at Bayern Munich, getting the best out of the likes of Serge Gnabry, getting Thomas Müller back in form. I mean, Thomas Müller, has always been a quality player, but had started to dip in these last couple of years, and to get him back at his devices, having Robert Lewandowski as well, having such a good season, I just can't see Bayern losing it. But the Bundesliga behind Bayern is going to be so tight this year. Leipzig, that run to the Champions League semi-finals, there's a real kind of optimism, I think, there now that I'm really looking forward to seeing there. I think equally with Dortmund, whether or not they lose Jadon Sancho, is such a good side, and they've really built something. Lucien Favre is a good coach as well. Leverkusen, I think, could slip losing Havertz, but I think really it's going to be tight behind Bayern this season, with Leipzig and Dortmund at the front of that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the Bundesliga have lost some significant quality players, but as they do, there's a lot of emerging talent. I'm very excited. I'm very excited for this upcoming Bundesliga season. I think it's going to be a really well, besides Bayern, I think it's going to be a very close one at the back. Gladbach are going to be as strong as ever. To rattle off a few names, I think Florian Wirtz, look out for him. I'm not going to call him the next Havertz, but certainly has the potential to be. And yeah, I think, yeah, like I said, Bundesliga is going to be very fun. Joe, also next week, Serie A kicks off next week. We don't know. I mean, Juventus have, as usual, had quite the summer. Andrea Pirlo is now in the hot seat. Luis Suarez might be en route to Juventus. We don't know about that one, if it's confirmed yet or anything, but they've certainly toyed with the idea. Weston McKennie also came into their midfield. Are Juventus the de facto favourites of Serie A?
I wouldn't say they're de facto favourites, although obviously I wouldn't be surprised if they were to make it 10 in a row. I personally have Inter winning the league this year, holding on to Conte despite the turbulent off-season they've had. It looks like they're going to land N'Golo Kante as well. That makes their already incredible midfield even better. Looks like they're going to offload Christian Eriksen as well, who, I mean, at the risk of offending the Premier League fans everywhere, simply has not been good enough for Inter. Bringing in Alexis Sanchez on barely a third of the wages he was on at Manchester United. It's an awful lot of good business for them, and I think they're going to hold on to Lautaro Martinez as well. I have Inter winning it over Juventus, but not by much. What I will say is that one of the biggest stories that no one's talking about, the most improved team in Europe last year, AC Milan, are going to be back in the top 4 this year. And my God, does it pain me to say it, but what they have done in terms of transfers and what Stefano Pioli's done in particular as manager, one of the biggest surprises of last year. AC Milan are finishing 4th in Serie A this year. And I will almost have to crawl into a ditch when it happens, because I will be in pain when it happens.
How they landed Sandro Tonali after all those links with Inter.
He supports them. It's as simple as that. But their midfield, seriously, Kessié, Benacer, Krunic, Çalhanoğlu, Tonali. That's amazing. I can barely think of a midfield more complete and balanced than that. They're going to finish 4th, and we're probably going to drop. Roma are probably going to finish in about 7th or something.
Sorry to hear that, buddy. I mean, you might get Chris Smalling back, so
yeah,
we'll see.
There's that.
Yeah, and obviously, a blow with the Zaniolo injury though. Seriously, that is a massive blow for him.
Honestly, I was in tears when that happened. I was in floods of tears when that injury came through.
For those who don't know, as Nicolo Zaniolo, linked with Spurs actually, he picked up his second ACL injury in 2 years, right? It's his second one in as many years. So
less than that. It's like second injury in about 14 months.
Heartbreaking. Heartbreaking with the ACL. Cam, I don't know. I mean, obviously Juventus had a bit of a surprising exit from the Champions League, and a lot's been made of their kind of strategy in terms of transfer business, and their squad's quite on the elder side for sure. But would you still? I mean, do you have them winning Serie A, or like Joe, do you kind of lean towards Inter?
Yeah, I think Inter definitely in keeping Conte was key, and I mean Antonio Conte is a proven winner. Getting N'Golo Kante as well, someone Conte really got the best out of, I think will really just give into that extra edge. I think again, there's that hunger in Inter Milan that I think with Conte especially, they want to win it. And I think the knock they got from that early Champions League exit last season, and the knock of the real inconsistency that they were playing Juventus last season, I think I can't call it. I think it's going to be very, very close. One team that we haven't mentioned yet, which I think from the romantic position, I really think could, if they can keep the form up from the past couple of seasons, is Atlanta. That team doesn't have the biggest names in European football, but in terms of its attacking abilities, it's one of the best in terms of the fact it can just score so many goals. It was scoring like 7-8 goals in so many matches in Serie A last year, and they nearly knocked PSG out the Champions League. That is a quality side, and I'm not going to say they're going to win the league, but I think it's going to be Inter, Juve, Atlanta running them close. I think it's going to be really tight, but I think as Joe said, AC Milan, very excited. I think they're going to get back towards the top of Italian and European football.
Yeah, I think Joe. I mean, this appears to be one of the most competitive Serie A seasons we're going to have in a while. I mean, building on last season, for the most part, it was very competitive. Obviously, the last stretch, teams began to fall away a bit. But you also got Lazio will be there fighting as well. As Cam says, Atalanta will be there, and then yeah. So I mean, it should be a pretty close season, the closest we've seen in a while.
Yeah, I'd say so. Just one point on Atalanta, actually, a stat that not many people have heard is that obviously they scored almost 100 goals in Serie A last year. This is the first time it's ever happened for a Serie A team. Not a single one of those goals was scored by an Italian player, which is amazing. There are some issues with Atalanta regarding Josip Ilicic. He's having some personal issues. We don't know when he'll be returning to training in the first team. Aside from that, though, I absolutely agree. Atalanta were one of the most romantic stories in football last year. I think they can hold on to a top four space. If I have to do a quick rundown of the top seven, Inter, Juve, Napoli, AC Milan, Atalanta, Lazio, Roma.
There we go. Actually, I was gonna. I mean, we didn't even mention Napoli, so you just did as well. They should also have a rebound of season. But there we go. I think that rounds up, I guess, our predictions on the other big four kind of European leagues, and that indeed will bring this stream to an end. So I know we've gone to run a bit over, so my thanks to Joe Spagnoli for coming on as always. Cam Hall, we'd love to have you back on as many Raw Sports shows. I know this was your first one. We'd love to have you back.
Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we'd love to have you back on, and loved hearing your opinions. Carl Henningway, who came on for a bit, and he had to dip out. Again, thanks to him for coming. This will be our last stream before Freshers Week. I know we've been asked to do something, so we will be putting together a broadcast of some sort. We just need to work that out, and then obviously term one, we will be back. We'll probably do a football talk show again with the Premier League broadcast schedule being so staggered. It's very hard to kind of plan around it, but we'll do our best. But until then, thank you for watching, and we will see you